Hi everyone, this is the presentation for the General Motors faulty ignition switch by Group BA of ENG 3000. During the design of General Motors small vehicles line, engineers Ray DiGiorgio and Gary Ullman, who worked on some mechanical concepts of their vehicles, changed the model of the ignition switch. Between 2001 and 2004, the problems with a faulty ignition switch arose in GM's small vehicles line. The switch would rotate and turn off the engine while the vehicle was in use. This resulted in 124 fatalities and 274 injuries. In 2004, GM refused to recognize the issue, lied to their shareholders, and continuously denied that there was any issue with their switch. Eventually, GM accepted there was an issue in 2005. Engineers advised GM to redesign the switch and even provided a viable solution, but GM made a business decision and rejected the proposal due to it being costly. Meanwhile, it only cost 90 cents per vehicle to fix. In March of 2014, GM recalled over 800,000 of its small vehicles line, which increased to 2.4 million later on. There are several violations of Acts 72 and 77 of professional misconduct present. GM failed to safeguard life through performing dishonorable and unfair actions towards public need by neglecting the fact that the switch was faulty and failing to report the problem and recalling their vehicles. Pertaining to the engineers, they failed to put the public welfare as paramount by changing the switch design and neglecting to record it so the issue could not be caught. Their actions were dishonorable to themselves and to the profession because people were killed and injured, and regard for the engineering discipline was severely damaged through those acts alone. Hypothetically, when performing an EGAT analysis by generating alternatives, some possible but not necessarily correct actions would be to do nothing about the situation, which still violates every aspect of 72 and 77. For engineers to fix the switch but not report, this still violates 72.2b, c, j, l, and 77.1.i, 77.1.ii, 77.1.iii, and 77.2i, and 77.2ii because there is a failure to report the problem and still puts people's lives in danger. Another solution would be for engineers to fix the switch and report the problem to their corresponding regulating body, which consists of no violations at all. Eventually, the resulting decision would be to report the issue and fix the switch because the public would be aware of the problem and will all be safe. In reality, engineers did not truly comply with the ethical standards set through regulation. Yes, they provided a solution to fix a problem, but at the end of the day, when GM refused their designs and refused to notify customers and recall their vehicles, they did nothing until they were told to. Eventually, engineers Gary Ullman and Ray DiGiorgio, who changed the switch without changing the part number and concealed the document containing the designs, were punished through being put on leave, while DiGiorgio was eventually fired. This case deals with some aspects of tort law, more specifically Donahue v. Stevenson case precedents, which deals with a duty of care to those who are negatively affected by the wrongdoings of an organization or individual. No contracts were evident between drivers and GM, and people suffered damages. General Motors owes a duty of care to those who were injured, lost money, families who lost their loved ones, and overall property damages. In analysis, the plaintiffs in this case are the individuals and families affected by the faulty ignition switch, and the defendant is General Motors. Pertaining to liability, there are several types present. These include vicarious liability because GM is responsible for the actions of their engineers, concurrent tortfeasors because multiple engineers are responsible for the problem of the switch and other GM executives chose to ignore it, and strict liability because GM is responsible for the damages their vehicles cause. Types of damages include consequential because people got injured and lost their income, general because people face pain through injury, and punitive because GM was punished due to their wrongful acts of negligence. Eventually resulting from the wrongful acts of engineers and GM was a final decision of judgment. GM was ordered to recall 2.6 million of their small vehicles line, had to pay $900 million in punitive damages, pay $600 million to compensate the surviving victims and families of the deceased, and engineers were placed on paid leave but were eventually fired. Thank you for listening.